friends, welcome back to the Field and Garden Podcast. It's your friend, Lisa Mason Ziegler, and thanks so much for joining me here today. In this episode, I am sharing a chat that I held over on Clubhouse, and it was titled, Having Faith in Cool Flowers. And I've been kind of talking about this subject now. It's January when I'm recording this, and it's the dead of winter for some people, and people are so afraid with their cool season hardy annuals that they fall planted. And I mean, I'm getting so many DMs and emails and social media posts, and there's just a lot of folks, and I totally get it because I've been there. So in this episode, I'm just reviewing some of those vulnerable points that you just really need to get on target with to help your cool flowers be the best cool flowers they can to survive winter. Because friends, here's the thing, cool flowers is not afraid. They are not afraid of cool and cold weather. It is us. But we have to give them what they need, and that's what I'm talking about today. So let's have a listen. Hi, Jessie.
Hi, Lisa. How's it going?
It's good. And Jesse and I are trying something new today that Clubhouse lets us. We have just pinned one of my many articles about cool flowers. So, it's 1:00. So I'm going to get the show started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Lisa Mason Ziegler, and welcome to the Flower Farmer Show. And I am joined here today by one of our team members, Jessie Graven, and she is here to help us with the admin. So, Jessie, you want to share how people can submit their questions for that I would love to answer for them, as well as what the little pin that I just posted at the top can do for them.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure. Hi, everybody. I'm Jessie, and I'm glad to be here today with Lisa. I want to let you know a few things about the room here. First of all, if you're not familiar with the Clubhouse clubs, I would let you know that if you go to the top of the screen there, the section, it says at the top flower farming, and there's a greenhouse. If you click on that, it'll give you the option to join Lisa's club here on Clubhouse. And Lisa, if you could please mute yourself just for a second. Thank you. Okay, so if you join the club here on Clubhouse, then you'll be notified when Lisa schedules her new chats. We've been doing them weekly at the same time, but if you join the club, you'll be notified and you'll have an opportunity to add that to your calendar if you like. So I wanted to also let you know that we now are using the replays feature here on Clubhouse. And so what that means is that this chat will be available to listen to after we're finished today, which is nice in case you want to review something or if you want to refer somebody to it to listen later. Another thing that is nice about the Clubhouse chats is that you can invite friends into the chat room. So the way you would want to do that is you can hit the little symbol at the bottom that looks like a person with a plus sign, and that will pull up everybody that you're friended with or are following here on Clubhouse, and you can click on their photo to invite them to the chat if you like. And we appreciate everybody being here. Lisa loves to answer questions during these chats. So there are a couple different ways that you can ask questions. You can use the hand raising feature, the little button at the bottom there, to let Lisa know that you would like to come up to the stage and ask your question. And then you also have the option of texting your question to me, and then I can ask it on your behalf to Lisa. So the way you would do that is you would use the back channel feature, which is the little paper airplane icon at the bottom right of your screen. If you tap on that and then put my name in, Jessi, my image should come up. And if you tap on that, you should be able to send me a message. And I will reply when I get it. So I wanted to just thank everyone again for being here today. And I'm looking forward to this discussion. Cool flowers is always a great topic. All right, Lisa, thank you.
Thank you, Jessie, so much for that. So let's get started with our topic today is having faith in cool flowers. And this is my topic of the week, probably of the whole month of January, because I have so many folks reaching out, being scared um, for their plants and cold weather. And so I just thought this would just be a great topic. And I just want to say front and center that growing cool flowers definitely has growing pains, not for the flowers, but for you. And what I really just want to suggest to everybody is the best growth in us happens through pain and hard lessons. So if you are suffering from some problem with cool flowers, which I may or may not reference here today, just know to make, I mean, all of our mistakes or wrong choices, you make the most out of them. And that means to learn from them. And that's where how it kind of happened for me. So I just don't want anybody to be discouraged. And so let's just talk about that. So many people right now are really learning some very valuable lessons, right? I mean, I'm getting just loads of DMs. The office is getting emails of people that just aren't sure about what they've done. They're just unsure, basically, right? And I will say to you that when when you nail it with cool flowers, meaning you got them in at the right time, the right place, in the right state, and you're growing them for your winter hardiness zone, you are not going to believe how carefree and beautifully they do. But that is not always the case. We sometimes hiccup or don't follow what the suggested rules are, which is perfectly fine. But I really recommend in the beginning, and when you're really getting your feet wet with cool flowers, which could take 4 or 5 years, um, to really try to follow the guidelines so that you do have more success. So I thought what I would share is when cool flowers are planted in as those things I just listed, at the right place at the right time, and these things that kind of guide us with cool flowers, they do so beautifully. But it's when we don't always follow those guidelines, and we all fall victim to this. Sometimes we don't even know we're doing something incorrectly. Other times we are just pushed to the limits and we have to make a poor choice. Um, and it's when those times happen is when cool flowers can become vulnerable. But I will tell you that I mean, it's like watching people, the light bulb just turn on over their head after, I have, especially when I was talking in person at conferences, people will come up afterwards and say, I struggled for like number of years with this, and sweet peas was always a really popular one, with sweet peas, and never could get it right. And then I finally planted them in the fall for my area and in the right spot. And oh my gosh, we have sweet peas coming out of our ears. So take heart, friends. There is guidelines, and when we try our best to follow them, the results are really good. And cool flowers can take down some storms, y'all. I will tell you before I go down my little list of what some of those things that make them vulnerable. Here in southeastern Virginia, we just kind of had a little storm. And what we kind of have more here of than other people do is we tend to get cold temperatures with not a lot of snow. I'm looking for 6 inches of snow on my garden for full protection. That's would be like a marriage made in heaven. But that's not what usually happens, as it happened this week. This week, the temperatures were going to plummet down into the low 20s, and they were calling for snow, which meant I had to take my row covers down, right? We always take row covers down when snow is coming. But yet it's getting kind of cold, and I have 2 or 3 varieties that I'm growing that are kind of on the edge of whether they are or aren't winter hardy. So I feel your pain. I was out standing at my garden staring night before last. Do you take the covers down or do you leave them up? You feel vulnerable both ways. So I totally and completely understand that. So my problem is we get cold temperatures with the threat of snow, but then the snow doesn't often come through and our covers are down. So there's just there's a lot of vulnerability involved in growing cool flowers. But I will tell you, you get stronger with each passing year and you figure it out. Even though the weather is very unpredictable now, you just kind of figure out which is the least damaging way to go. And for me, it would have been better to take my covers down, which I did, and risk some cold damage than leaving the covers up and having a lot of snow come and smothering my cool flowers if snow would have stuck around for a while. So let's talk about some of the things that make cool flowers vulnerable when we don't follow or aren't able to follow those guidelines. Hands down, I would say is wrong planting time. I mean, I get tons of messages from people saying, I didn't get my cool flowers planted. Don't you think that we could plant them late? Sure, you can plant them late. But what happens is when cool flowers that you're fall planting, particularly, this is really true for, when they go into winter without their best game face on, that's when you start to have troubles and improper planting times, and that can go either way. That can mean planting too early and getting really large plants that make them more vulnerable to winter damage, or planting really late, which means they perhaps don't have quite the root system that's very well established to face the cold, or they don't get a little bit of top growth, a little, what you want them to have to go through winter. So the wrong planting time is really paramount in my book. I try to get that part right, and write it in stone on my calendar. When do I have to start seeds to have the proper planting time, or when do I have to order seeds to be able to direct seed at the proper time, and then making it a part of my workday when that date comes around. Another thing that I see people struggling with is sometimes we're just planting puny transplants for whatever reason, that we really have to button up our game on growing healthy, strong transplants. Because if you plant a puny cool flower, it's different than planting warm season stuff. When we plant, let's just say, beginning of summer and you're planting warm season annuals, if you have a plant that looks a little, you're not sure, it's really okay because those plants are going to be planted and they're going to hit the ground running to grow because it's the growing season. That's not true for cool flowers. They have to go through a lot of tough conditions to get over to the other side where spring is, right? So when we put them in puny or questionable, my rule is if you have to look at the plant twice to think, oh, is that really a good one? Then it's not good enough. And that's why we always start more seeds than we need plants. It's to allow for all of these practices. Here's another one that I often see is folks direct seeding when transplants are what are recommended or vice versa. I often find that people choose to plant any flower or plant, not just cool flowers. They tend to choose their personal preferred method over what is the best method to end up with the best plant in the garden. And so a lot of times that's due to lack of education, or just not realizing that that's even an issue. But every plant, when I say a preferred method to start, it just means it's easier and more successful, which is what 99% of people want. There is the person that doesn't mind a challenge, but I will tell you, as a commercial grower, that should not be you. That's that's a gamble that you just don't need to take. So figuring out which way it needs to go is really, really important. And here is another one. There's so many good ones, y'all. I mean, there's just so many reasons that cool flowers may suffer, or even you may lose them, but they almost all fall into these categories. The next one is fall planting a cool flower that's not, in fact, winter hardy in your zone, and then you're not taking extraordinary measures. which I don't recommend anybody do that until you are a very seasoned grower. There's too many cool flowers that are easier to do than to go through that. And what I mean is somebody, let's just take for instance, dill and straw flowers are both cool flowers that are like sometimes they survive in zone 7, sometimes they don't, but they're pretty reliable in zone 8. Um, and so if you live in zone 7, you have to know that you better give that dill everything it needs to be the healthiest, the most established, the perfect size as it goes into winter, or you're really going to lose them. So fall planting dill is okay if you know the risk. But if you aren't aware of it and don't take some steps to kind of give it a little ump up because of that it's not winter hardy in your zone and you lose it, you kind of beat yourself up over it. But the writing is on the wall, y'all. The writing is really on the wall. So fall planting only what is winter hardy in your winter hardiness zone is, step one in being successful with overwintering cool flowers. Another one, particularly if you have a wet winter, and this is really, I mean, it's true for everybody, but those of us like me that, I mean, here in southeastern Virginia, we just get so much monsoon rain anymore. It's like it won't rain for 10 or 12 days, and then all of a sudden, you know, inches come all at one time. Planting cool flowers in areas that have excellent drainage is really, really key. They succumb to wet feet problems, whether it's disease or just simply drowning, because cool weather gardening and farming, the soil is not drying out naturally like it does in the heat of summer. It's cool and cold. So you can't depend on that part of a drying out process. You really have to have great drainage. And a lot of cool flowers are super susceptible. Sweet peas. I mean, I could list them all actually, but stuff just really needs to be in an area, the very best draining area that you have in your garden or on your farm. And then I'll tell you this from firsthand. Here this time of the year at the Gardener's Workshop, I'm at the fulfillment center today, right? And, we're just piled high with orders from over at the holidays. And it's, we're going into this is the busiest month of the year, January is. And, people or don't have enough row covers on hand. They don't have enough row covers for the amount of cool flowers that they've planted. And then a weather event is coming and they order. And we know this because they're like begging us to please, push their order forward. And we do our best to help people when we can. But that is kind of a basic rule with me is I want to have at least enough row cover to cover my entire cool flower garden in the event, I mean, I'm in zone 8. If I'm planting stuff that is are really important crops, let's just say that. I can remember one year we were dropping down to single digits for just a couple days at night. This was a couple years ago, and I had the most gorgeous stand of bells of Ireland seedlings. We direct seed them in the fall. They were, I mean, I had a whole 120-foot bed. It was amazing. I was terrified I was going to lose them. And I was just so grateful that I had enough row cover, not to just cover them once, but I actually double and even triple covered part of the bed where I had enough to do that for those couple of nights. Not having your security blanket after you've grown really great crops is really, really a problem. So it is just really following some general guidelines and trying to stay between the lines, at least while you're getting your feet wet, right? Is really what my recommendation is to people. And cool flowers, in spite of us, typically takes the cold like a champ unless we've made them vulnerable in whatever way that is. And so I'm going to, we do have one hand up, I think, and I'm going to ask Jesse, do you have anybody that is I'm going to invite Carol up. And Carol, when you come up, just mute yourself for just a second and I'll find out from Jesse. Do you have anything on the back channel, Jesse?
I do. I have several questions. You want me to give you one to start?
Sure, that'd be great.
Okay. I have one from Sue. She says, should I be worried that some of my cool flowers are starting to bloom?
That is just such a really great question because we get that really often. And sometimes that happens. And my rule of thumb is this, the way that I handle early blooming for whatever reason, um, is to um, so here's the consideration that I think of when I see that happen. Are we really heading into deep winter finally? I mean, I know we can still have warm days, but if we're through this windows of these warm runs of days, then I, in fact, will, if we're in winter, I'll go ahead and just take that stem off just like I was cutting it for a cut flower, just getting rid of it. But if we're still experiencing warm days and there's more warmer weather than I think we're supposed to be having in the 2 week forecast, I just leave it. Because when you pinch, that sends the signal to the plant to send up more stems. And we really don't want to do that. We want the cold weather to really put cool flowers into dormancy for that brief period of time. And so if it's finally gotten cold where you are, but there's a few plants that have blooms on them, really you could go either way. You could leave them or you could cut them. But if you're still experiencing warm weather, I would leave it because you do not want to encourage more stems to grow. So, Carol, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? So, while Jesse, do you have another question while Carol maybe figures out? Carol, if you, Jesse, can you tell her perhaps how to unmute? I don't know how it appears.
Yeah, so the mute button is at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and it looks like a little microphone. And if there you
There
go.
she is.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi.
Carol. Thanks for coming
Hi.
up and asking.
I'm so excited. I've listened to you on your replays, and this is the first time I've caught you live, but I'll get straight to my question. I am in South Georgia, Zone 8B, and I missed my window to plant my bupleurum last fall. But I'm looking at the back of the seed package, and it says it will germinate at 55 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. And my soil temperature is staying at 60 right now. So I wondered if I could risk direct sowing the bupleurum since it is the suggested best way to do it, or would you wait?
That is such a great question, Carol. And, you did your homework. And I would say, because of where you are and how warm it is, I would definitely try direct sowing some. The thing to keep in mind about bupleurum is bupleurum is a really slow germinator, and it will be even slower if the conditions are a little cooler than what it really wants. And when it does first sprout, they are the thinnest, tiniest little seedlings, as well as they are often burgundy-ish in color, so you really can't see them. So you'll really have to keep your eyes peeled. But I would definitely give that a try because bupleurum is definitely one of those that will germinate at cooler temps. And because you're not in a deep freeze like the rest of us, then I would definitely go for it.
Oh, thank you so much. I do have one more little question, but I don't
Sure.
want to more
Go
time.
ahead.
This is really not about cool flowers, but I have a quick question. Because we get powdery mildew usually in July here in South Georgia, should I still space my sunflowers 6 inches or would you go further for better airflow?
The problem with doing that is when you go further apart, the flowers are going to get too big to really be useful as a cut flower. But I would definitely focus on growing those varieties that are resistant. There are several colors in the Pro Cut family. There is an orange, I think the bicolor. There's 4 or 5 of them that are downy mildew resistant, and I would only be growing those varieties. Be sure that you're rotating well, and because you don't want to be doing sunflowers repeatedly in the same air spot once you've had that, because it can become a really big problem. But I would still space them close, just grow varieties that are resistant.
Thank you so much. And I'll let
You're-
somebody get a question in. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, Carol.
So Lisa, I was just going to add, in case anyone's unfamiliar with the downy mildew resistant varieties, you'll probably see those listed as DMR after the name of the variety.
Oh, good point. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, Sherry. Do you have a question?
Hi, Lisa. Yes, this is my first year using hoops and row covers. I'm in zone 6A in Rhode Island, and we're supposed to get snow on Friday. And I'm just confused whether I put the row cover back over it once it snows or I leave them off.
That is a really great question that I hear that a lot from folks, and I understand completely your confusion. And so once you put the covers down and the snow comes, you're not going to even attempt to put the row covers back up until the snow is melted. Not only would it be physically impossible because the row covers will be frozen and stuck together, but the snow literally is a better insulator than those row covers could have ever provided. So they're actually like a warm blanket on your plants. So until and actually, I just went out. I actually, it's so funny. Even last night, I walked out to my garden at dusk when my husband said it's going to be I'm not sure if it was last night or the night before, it's going to be in the low 20s. And I knew my covers were down because we had just had snow. And I said, I'm going to run out there and put my covers up on just a few areas of the garden. He said, okay. I went out there and I thought, what was I thinking? I mean, they're frozen solid. So the choice has been made for you. You won't be putting them back up until the snow is pretty much gone. Does that help?
Yes, very much. Thank you so much for all you do.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for coming up.
Thanks.
All
So I
right,
have some
Jess.
other ones. Yeah, I have some other ones here on the back channel, if that's okay.
Sure.
Um, I have from Christy. She's in Zone 7B, North Carolina. Says, my rows are prepared. Can I go ahead and plant out my winter hardy cool flower seedlings at the beginning of February? Or is it necessary in my zone to wait until February 14th? Also, she says, is there a cool weather seedling that you would say absolutely don't try to grow in very early spring in my zone 7B?
All good questions. And your window of when to plant is really based on your frost dates, not your zone. Your zone only tells you, your winter hardiness zone, whether or not you can fall plant. That's really all your zone is really needed for. So the planting dates of when you would do fall planting or very early spring planting is definitely works from your frost date. And so you just want to work back 6 to 8 weeks from when from your last spring frost, your historic last spring frost, and mark your calendar. And that's your optimal window of planting. And I will say, if your beds are all prepared, if you have a window of opportunity a week before your 8 weeks and you have hoops and row covers, if you needed, I would say plant early. I'm all about getting stuff in earlier than later, because depending on our spring, sometimes where I am, we go straight from winter right into hot, humid weather. We don't have those cooler days and nights like what spring is really like. And so, really, where, 7B, I don't know what your summers are like, but what I think about when I'm deciding whether or not I'm going to very early spring plant a crop, especially if I'm not familiar with it yet. We're always adding, we're discovering I'm discovering plants that are cool season hardy annuals that I wasn't aware of, right? Is I think of, did I struggle to get good stem length? If you plant, like Bells of Ireland is one I would never very early spring plant, because it will just be 10 inches tall when I do that, because it barely gets sprouted, I mean up and growing, before the heat comes, and we either lose it to bacteria spots, or it's just too short. So that is my key, is whether if it's a disease pest predisposed plant, I try not to do very early spring. And if I struggle to get good stem length, that's another one that makes it an iffy candidate for whether I plant it in very early spring. Was that all of that, Jesse, or did she ask me something else? I'm sorry.
Well, she was saying, is there anything for 7B that you would definitely not try to plant in the spring?
I mean, it just really depends on, it's like if she's in the mountainous areas, I would plant everything. But if you get an early heat, humidity, weather early in the spring, I wouldn't do snaps. Snaps are the one crop that the excellent performance, abundance, and stem length and size of fall planted snaps. It doesn't matter how many times I mean, we plant a ton in the fall, and then I've often would think I'll plant more in very early spring. The very early spring planting underperforms the fall planted every year. It falls victim to rust. They aren't as tall, they aren't as abundant. So again, what I say doesn't work for me may not in fact work for you. I say do little tests, do small plantings of, that's what I did is I planted everything for many years in fall and very early spring. And some stuff, it just wasn't worth it. We just didn't need it. And that's what I would recommend to people to do.
Okay, I have one from Autumn, and Autumn says, if I didn't direct seed Queen Anne's lace in fall, should I sow it indoors in January? Or if I have a bed prepared, can I direct seed in January?
So if you're speaking of the real Daucus variety of false Queen Anne's lace or the Ami Magus, which is the white version of what looks like Queen Anne's lace, both of those I've done both of what you've just mentioned, Autumn. And depending on my weather outdoors, I have had pretty okay results direct seeding it in very early spring. But the problem is if it stays too chilly for too long, the seeds just sit there and they don't sprout until, just a couple, 3 weeks, 4 weeks before last frost. And you kind of lose that. So I would say for me is I would start them indoors. And the secret about getting great germination on Ami Magus and Daucus that I have found starting them indoors, and we of course start them in soil blocks, is we place them on the seedling heat mat for only 24 hours to just warm the soil and warm that seed for that short period of time. Then we take them off the heat mat and just set them on a shelf in that grow room, which is at about 65-degree air temperature, and just water them like you do everything else in the room. And I'm telling you, we get almost 100% germination. It takes about 7 to 10 days for it to happen, but I would definitely probably do that over sowing them outdoors.
Okay, thanks. So then I have one from Melanie. She's asking about, she's in Central Virginia, and she says the snow's going to be gone soon that came recently. And she says that they have a week of temperatures in the upper teens and low 20s coming. And she's wondering if she needs to double cover for Bells of Ireland, Snaps, and Ami and Blue Perm.
So that's a really great question. So Ami Magus, tell me again what she's got planned. Snaps and Buplurum, I think would probably be all right. Although, we cover our plants not for winter cold protection as much as just general good health. What was the other thing she said? Ami and something else.
Yeah, Bells of Ireland, Snaps, Ami,
Bells.
and Blue Perm, and Bachelor Buttons. But I think Bachelor Buttons are okay.
Yeah. So of those, the bachelor buttons, the snaps, and the buplurum are super cold hardy in, I think you're probably zone 7 in central Virginia. Would probably be all right. They would benefit from being covered just so they won't sustain any foliage damage, perhaps, if they would. But the Ami Magus can definitely sustain foliage damage at those low temperatures. It won't often completely die, but it does significantly damage the foliage. And bells could be the same way. And because the foliage actually is part of the foliage that'll be on the mature stems, I would say for sure, I would probably double cover Ami and bells, but the others should be fine, I would think.
Great. Okay. So I because I forgot to mention this earlier, and it's a new thing, I wanted to just point it out again. Lisa had mentioned that we pinned a link to the top of the chat room here. And it's our first time doing this, and it says the secret sauce of growing cool season flowers from the Gardener's Workshop. So that's a link to one of Lisa's articles on her website. And it has information for growing cool flowers, but it also has links to tons of her other free resources related to cool flowers. There's so much information there. And so if you click on that link, it should not take you out of this chat. It'll just open it up as a separate window. But we wanted to make you guys aware of how to use that new feature. So I do have another question here from Stephanie. She says, are there any references for what each seedling looks like as they emerge? I planted in rows as you suggested, but deer ran through, and now I don't know which are weeds and which are flowers.
Yeah, that is just so annoying. And we have deer walk through our garden too. So the 30 cool flowers that are in Cool Flower, the book Cool Flowers, does have images on most of them, I believe, and that is something that I am working on. Just can't believe how hard it is to kind of do that. And so other than just putting that into a search engine, the specific name of what you're wondering about, and seedling, and then hit on the search bar, it normally will say all or images or shop. Hit images, and it'll just bring up tons of images. And, hopefully it'll be a reliable source that you actually come upon. But there is some in Cool Flowers.
That's a great idea. I've actually done that myself, looked up what seedlings look like just from the Google search of images. So if you look at enough entries, even if you get a few in there that aren't correct, you should be able to get a consensus at some point. So, okay, so I have, let's see, one more question on here. It looks like from Janet. She says, is it too early to start Rudbeckia seeds for zone 5B6A to plant in early spring? My frost date is end of May.
Okay, so that's a great question. So end of May, end of April, end of March. So the end of March would be when you would be targeting to plant those. And Rudbeckia is one of those slow growers. I don't know where I was commenting on this. Rudbeckia is just a slow poke. And so that is actually the first cool flower we start in the fall, the seed, further in advance of all the others. So I would say to you that you would probably, so if you're planting the end of March, I don't know if you're soil blocking I can't comment on a cell tray, but I would give 8 weeks in a soil block for sure, and just give it the conditions it wants. Those cool, warm, 65 to 70, bright, good grow light. And they'll do beautifully, but they're painful. It's painful to watch because it's so slow.
Right. Well, Janet also asked as an unrelated question. She says, does a thicker row cover that you cannot see through provide more protection than one I can see through?
Say that again.
She's wondering if a thicker row cover, like one she cannot see through, would provide more protection than one she could see through.
Okay. So good question again. And the reason that I use the lightest weight, and they actually call it often, and we call it floating row cover. It's light enough that it does have some uses without hoops. The reason I choose to go with the lightest weight is, first off, I only want one weight of row cover on my farm, because you can't believe how easy it is to get them mixed up. And when you get a heavier cloth, it blocks more light, and it doesn't allow water. So the Ag 19, which is what we use and sell, allows 85% of light and water penetration. And that's why we can leave it up all winter, and our plants do beautifully. If you use a heavier cloth, you have to know that you're going to have to perhaps monitor and help with watering potentially, because water may not penetrate it as much. And the light factor is another real big problem of that. So for me, it just made better sense to use lightweight row covers. And in the instances that I did need a heavier cover, which was not nearly as frequently as I needed a lighter cover, I would just double them.
Okay, yes. So then I have from Christy. She says, I was given a grow light rack that I'm grateful for, but I'm not educated about knowing which lights need to be at what height. Do you have any suggestions, or can you point me to something that would help with placement of grow lights on a rack?
So that's a good question. Grow lights are very confusing to people, and I am by a long shot not a grow light specialist. I just I use and sell T12 and T8 lights. Actually, I think they're T12s. They used to be T8s. T8 and T12s are the lights give off a very small amount of warmth, which is very beneficial to seedlings. And that light can actually be placed just above the canopy of what's growing underneath of it. I mean, like just 2 or 3 inches above your seedlings. This allows you to maximize grow light stands so you can have more shelves with more seedlings growing. Some lights, like T5 bulbs, which are really small, and the way you can identify them, they're about the size of your pinky in diameter. They get super hot, and you have to really space them out from the canopy of your seedlings. In fact, I did buy some years ago, not knowing any of this. I cooked several shelves of seedlings in just one day. I mean, literally cooked them to like toast that was left in the toaster too long. um, and so what we had to do was eliminate some of my shelves. So it really impeded upon how many seedlings I could actually start and support at a time. So the quick answer to your question is you need to look at what kind of lights you're buying, and then what that recommendation is for the how far away from the seedlings. The ones that we offer, you can put within 2 or 3 inches of the seedlings, and it actually benefits the seedlings to have that little bit of warmth, but it does not overheat them.
Okay, let's see. I do have another one here.
And this will be our last one, I think.
Okay. Let's see. What are all your longer okay, sorry. She's asking about flowers that take longer to germinate and grow into good seedlings.
Yes.
And she says, which ones are those that you would start earlier than 6 to 8 weeks before last frost? She mentions here eucalyptus and Rudbeckia, but she's wondering if there are other ones like that that take a long time.
Not that I actually start myself. Lysianthus would definitely fall into that same category, but it's even slower than Rudbeckia. And I'm just thinking, sorry. Rudbeckia, because we grow so many, we grow like probably 6 or 7 different varieties of Rudbeckia. That creates a significant portion for us to start. But really, Rudbeckias are all that come to mind to be slow enough growers that we start them a couple, 3 weeks before we start our other cool season hardy annuals. So we're just about out of time, and I just appreciate everybody joining us here. And something that's just been kind of running around in my mind, because I apply it to myself even in business today. And I read this somewhere, and unfortunately, I can't remember the person that said it. It was a gentleman that's not with us anymore, I believe. But he gave some advice, and he said that slowly is the fastest way to get where you want to be. And I added, as a flower farmer. I'll say it again. Slowly is the fastest way to get where you want to be. And that just means that I know that everybody wants to be successful super quick and have a great crop right out of the gate, but it just doesn't happen like that, folks. I mean, you have to, hit potholes and run over the speed bump and drag the bottom of the car and all of those things that we all wished and hoped that we could, get it perfectly right. But I promise that once you hit it right with one cool flower, and it just does beautifully, and it's the one that you actually ignored, you know because you did everything right for that one, or you followed the guidelines. I don't want to say right, but you figured out for your region, for your winter hardiness zone, what grows best for you. And I'll tell you one other little thing, and then we're signing off here. um, those are the flowers that I gravitated to. I am not looking for a struggle at all. That's why for me, it seems pretty simple to say, all right, what does it need? Give me the ABCs. All right, I'll do that. And if they fail, I'll try 3 times. That's my number. I'll try something, I'll grow something for 3 years in a row. And if it's not coming out smelling like a rose at the end, it gets off my list. And so not everything grows great for everybody. And just remember that, good growth happens through pain and hard lessons. And there's just no more painful time for people than right now, y'all. You just can't believe the messages that I'm getting over people that are just really just let it go. And what you need to think about now is, what can I do to be a better cool flower grower next time? And I'm telling you, writing on that calendar to have your seeds at the proper time, to start transplants at the proper time, to have seeds to direct sow at the proper time is the best thing you can do moving forward. So, Jesse, I really appreciate you joining me here today and sharing with me the tip to be able to share one of my articles here on Clubhouse. And I just hope everybody has a great week. And we'll be back here next week at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for the Flower Farmer Show. And thank you, Jesse.
It's my pleasure as always. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Yep. Thank you, everybody. See you again soon. Ciao. All right, friends. I hope this kind of inspired you. If you are in the ditches right now with cool flowers, meaning you've, made some wrong choices or you're having a lot of troubles, make the most of your troubles. Make them a learning experience. Figure out what you did right or wrong. Figure out, when are you supposed to plant? Should it be planted in the fall where you are? Is it winter hardy? And build your personalized, custom little data bank for your area for cool flowers. And then get it on your calendar. When should you order seeds so you can start seeds on time, so you can direct seed on time? And so you know which way you're supposed to plant them. Are you supposed to direct seed them or transplant them? Friends, it takes years, as I think I closed with, the slowest way to get to where you want to be. The fastest way to get to where you want to be is to go the slowest. And that just means to go slow, start small, and make the most out of what you're doing. Cool flowers are awesome, but there is definitely a learning curve. So do not be upset with yourself or hard on yourself. It'll come, friends. If you would like to learn about even more resources, if you visit my blog over at thegardenersworkshop.com, go to the Learning Center, go to the Field and Garden blog, and then go to the Cool Flower category. That, my friends, is where you will find a lot of resources that can help you out. So until we meet again next time, friends, ciao.